everyone, it's Steve with Empire Academy, and today we're going to talk about is the lifetime tenant promise. Now, one thing you want to understand is the lifetime tenant promise is our most popular package that we have for owners, and there's a reason because of that. I'm going to explain that. When you own a property and you own a rental property, one of your biggest concerns and fears is having that property go empty, because that if that property goes empty, now you've got to pay to release the property. You've got vacancy where you're not getting any income for that property. You got to do a make ready for that property. And if you were expecting to get cash flow and you were forecasting your money, or you were planning to get money during those 2 or 3 months that it's empty, or 4 months, depending on the market and the time of year, now that's all gone, right? So it's very important that our lifetime tenant promise is explained to the owners and they understand why it's so valuable. So first and foremost, they will pay 50% of the lease cost for the renewal. So this is when the tenant is going to renew the lease, and they're going to pay 50% of what that is. So let's just say, for example, if the rent was $1,200 a month, they will pay $600 for the renewal cost. So next thing is what do they get with that? And what they get is when a owner signs up and we lease a property for an owner, we will give that tenant a 12-month tenant promise. What that means is during the first 12 months of tenancy, we will guarantee that if that tenant should leave for eviction or vacate or any reason, we will cover the cost to release that property. Now, there are certain instances where it is not, basically they are allowed to be out of their lease. Military deployment, maybe a sexual predator is stalking them, and maybe something else. So there's like 2 or 3 things you want to check with your supervisor as to what they are. So it's family violence, military deployment, and sexual offender. So those are the things that they can get out of. But we will cover the lease for anything. If a tenant leaves or is vacating or anything like that, we will cover that cost. So basically we're putting our money where our mouth is, and if that tenant should leave, we will cover that. That's the first thing. Second thing is we will, now this is for the lifetime. So if that tenant renews for a 2-year lease on the renewal, we will cover that again, and we will keep covering it for the lifetime of that tenant. Every time that tenant renews, we will cover that with our tenant promise. So that's important because now they do not have to worry about excessive costs, and they don't have to worry about the vacancy, which is a big thing. So the next thing is they will get a detailed review of the tenant eligibility. So we will make sure that we will do a thorough background check on that tenant and make sure that they are still a tenant in good standing and they can still rent the property. Next thing is we will do a tenant satisfaction guarantee through the renewal process and into the property. One of the things that we do with our tenant satisfaction is we will give a lease incentive. So what a lease incentive is should that tenant, we talk to them about releasing their property, and what we will do with that is we will go ahead and we will basically give them an incentive to stay, whether it's maybe doing their yard service, maybe it's painting a room, adding a ceiling fan. There are things that we can do to try to incentivize that tenant to stay. That is something that we at Empire will cover the cost for. We will bear the cost of that for the owner to get their tenant to stay. So again, it's very important to understand that, paying again, it's something that our owners have asked for. It is our most popular thing. The lifetime tenant promise is something exactly what our owners want, and it's something that is necessary because you want to explain to the owners that when they own a property, they own a business. And when you own a business, you want to be able to predict cash flow, and you want to be able to predict your losses. Well, if you have a tenant that leaves or you have some other issues, you can't always predict that. With our tenant promise, our lifetime tenant promise, now you can pretty much predict what your costs are going to be throughout the year, because now you don't have to worry about paying the costs to release a property, which, every city's different, but, it could be up to 1 month's rent, depending on what city you're in, obviously. But you want to make sure that that is now covered should the tenant vacate the property. It's for the lifetime of that tenant and their renewal, and we will cover the cost of the lease renewal. The lease incentive program. So anything that the tenant wants done to the property or anything that we negotiate with them, we will come out of pocket and we will cover the cost. And at the end of the day, we're making their property nicer. So you can explain to the owner that this is something we are doing for them. We're making their property nicer. So it actually makes sense to do that program. And the savings, most importantly, I would explain to the owner, is the mental stress of not having to worry about it. They need to quantify what that cost is of the mental stress of dealing with that. And that's something that they don't have to do when they have our lifetime tenant promise. So this is Steve with Empire Academy, and I hope this helps.